Greetings. Today is Friday, March 27th, and I want to share another brief meditation with you today. This morning it is on Psalm 63. What do you long for? The pressing concern seems rather clear these days, doesn't it? We long for an end to this pandemic. We long for an end to the suffering and the struggle. But when this passes, as I hope and trust it will, what will we long for then? What if our greatest longing cannot be satisfied by this world? This isn't a hypothetical question. The longing for what the Bible refers to as shalom, or universal flourishing, or the way things are supposed to be, has always existed. But where can we find it? How can it be found? What David expresses in Psalm 63 is the faith-filled truth. What we long for can only be found in Christ. He writes in verse 1 of how earnestly he seeks God. And we read then in verse 2, he says, I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. As a result of this, a believer finds that only in God through Christ, can our needs truly be satisfied, our deepest longing. And then comes a central reason that David expresses so much contentment here in Psalm 63. He writes, because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. Let that soak in a moment. God's love is better than life. Now, David uses here a word in the Hebrew that's chesed, which really refers to God's loving kindness. It stresses, from a biblical perspective, the faithful continuance, the permanence of God's love. That's why it's better than life, you see. Life, sadly, can be lost. God's love cannot. And David longs for God in this way, and for that reason. As he says in verse 1, he's in a dry and weary land. But he knows, faith knows, no matter what trouble he meets, God's love always remains. Therefore, he says in the rest of the psalm, with his lips and his life, he will glorify God. He says in verse 8 that he will cling to him. And why shouldn't he? Why wouldn't we? His love is better than life, and that's a truth that Jesus shows. He shows us how the love of the Father at the cross is better, stronger. That's the shalom we long for. The shalom we long for in a world where things are not yet the way they're supposed to be. Here's the invitation. Too often we settle for what cannot satisfy. C.S. Lewis describes us well when he says, we are far too easily pleased. What do we long for? More than life, may we rest in the love of God, which is steadfast, his chesed love, and glorify the one who proves God's love, and in how in him we not only get God's love, we truly also find life. In the season of social distancing, I encourage all of us to avoid social isolation. Stay in touch with one another, stay in touch with your neighbors, especially with those who are vulnerable. Thank you to those who joined me for our first fellowship and prayer event via Zoom. Stay tuned for more opportunities. Finally, join me in praying for those impacted specifically by COVID-19 and for all those who are serving on the front lines against this crisis. Until next time, may the peace of God, which transcends understanding, guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.